Senator Brett, Senator Warnock from Georgia is recognized.
Thank you so very much, Chair Brown. According to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, there are just a handful of private equity firms that individually own more than 10,000 single-family homes around Atlanta. And during this time of elevated rates and in the middle of a housing crisis, large institutional investors and Wall Street private equity firms from outside Georgia are effectively boxing first-generation home buyers out of the housing market by gobbling up the available housing stock in Atlanta. This is particularly egregious when you think about the role that Wall Street played in what we saw just a few years ago with the crash. This is also why I previously introduced the Housing Market Transparency Act, legislation that would provide greater transparency over who actually owns properties built under the low-income housing tax credit, which includes significant private equity investors. I'd like to ask the Honorable Sandra Thompson, Acting Secretary, thank you for all the work that your agency has done to make homeownership more affordable for Americans, but I'm troubled by the increase in private equity ownership in the housing market. What steps is your agency taking to ensure that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are not passing economic benefits intended for ordinary Americans to private equity firms?
Sure. So thank you for the question. And Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac do not engage in institutional investors for single-family rentals at all. The agency had one transaction in 2018 and decided to not engage in those activities anymore. So we do not permit institutional investors to purchase loans for acquisition. I would say, though, that there's a number of investors that these are more mom and pop as opposed to institutional investors. Like Fannie Mae has a requirement that one person can have 10 properties, like one individual, and Freddie Mac, one person can have 6. But those, again, are more local mom and pop. They're not institutional investors.
But so are there steps, though, that your agency can take to protect ordinary folks from this increase in private equity ownership in the marketplace at large?
Well, for the loans that Fannie and Freddie won't purchase those loans because they're ineligible to make those loans. So one of the things that we do with our REO portfolio is we have a 30-day first look period where investors are not able, the house goes on the market and you have to be owner occupied or a community development investment fund or a nonprofit to purchase. First, you get 30 days before the house goes on the market. So those are some of the things that we have done.
So my larger concern, obviously, is to ensure that ordinary, hardworking American families in Georgia, all across our country, have access to the American dream. And this is what allows for generational wealth. It gets passed, allows for generational wealth. So as home prices have increased, the ability for many Americans to purchase an affordable home has moved out of reach. This is particularly true for first-generation home buyers. On top of this, we see a racial home ownership gap that actually widened in 2023. Only 44% of Black Americans own a home, a total that's almost 29 percentage points lower than white Americans. Acting Secretary Todman, under President Biden, federal housing agencies have been committed to providing resources for new home buyers. I was glad to see the president call on Congress to pass a $10,000 tax credit for first-time home buyers. Can you detail why this home credit is important and who is it targeting?
Senator, thank you for that question. And I think you've provided the facts very clearly in terms of who will be most assisted by this type of investment in first-time homeowners. And I'll take it to the next level, first generation home ownership, which was a part of the president's proposal in his 2025 budget proposal. This is critical. We know that homeownership remains the number one way that the middle class is able to generate and sustain generational wealth. And as you so well said, there's only about 44% of Black Americans that have access to that generational wealth. And so we know that by providing concepts like first generation down payment, we know what that means in the long term. We know that having a tax credit that allows those families who are locked out of home ownership, what it means to sort of have access to that type of subsidy to write down some of their upfront costs. But we also know that we have to do more as a country, and we're doing more as an administration to make sure that there are homeownership units to purchase by making sure we can encourage the increase of supply of starter homes. So we are looking at this in the full 360 and look forward to sharing more with you and your team.
Well, thank you. That's exactly the work that my Down Payment Toward Equity Act is focused on, helping these first-generation home buyers buy down the rate, support them with closing costs, et cetera. Thank you for your work on this, and I look forward to working with the chair and the committee to get legislation signed into law.
Thank you. Senator